Hey guys, tonight we step into a world locked in ice. The year is about 20,000 BCE, and you're standing at the edge of a frozen steppe that stretches further than your eyes can follow. A biting wind slices through the air, carrying with it the sting of snow and the dry rasp of dust whipped up from endless plains. To the north, walls of white tower into the sky, immense glaciers, taller than any cathedral you'll ever see, their cracked faces gleaming pale blue under a waning sun. Somewhere behind you a fire sputters weakly, its smoke snatched and torn by the wind, and you're left clutching your fur cloak tighter, wondering how much longer your toes will still feel like toes. This is not a landscape that welcomes you. Herds of reindeer shift in restless lines across the tundra, always a little too far away. Wolves shadow the dark tree lines, their eyes catching flashes of amber light. The ground crunches hard beneath your feet, frozen earth mixed with shards of bone from animals long picked clean. You breathe in air so cold it stings your lungs. You probably won't survive this, if we're being honest, but that's the entire story tonight. The few who did, the handful of humans who carved existence from a world that wanted them gone. If you're ready to huddle close to that tiny fire with me, let's dig into the tale of 20,000 BCE, the first humans who survived the Ice Age. If you like this kind of calm history to drift off with, make sure to gently tap subscribe and share it with someone else who might need sleep and a story tonight. And since we're about to wander across a frozen steppe together, drop your location and your local time in the comments. Let's see how many of us are spread out across the map tonight, surviving our own little climates. Now tuck in, close your eyes if you want. The story begins here, in the sharp, glittering cold of the late Ice Age, where survival wasn't guaranteed, and yet, somehow humanity carried on. The late Ice Age landscape is not the neat postcard of white powder and blue skies that modern winters bring. It's something harder, hungrier, and far more unforgiving. Vast portions of North America and Europe are sealed under ice sheets several kilometers thick, their crushing weight reshaping the very land beneath them. Imagine entire mountains ground down into valleys, rivers forced into new paths, and coastlines swallowed under the glacial spread. You live at the margins of these frozen walls, eking out space where tundra or boreal forests cling. South of the glaciers, the land rolls wide and barren. Grass and moss grow tough, low to the ground, and trees appear in thin, stunted lines along rivers. The herds that roam here are the lifeblood of every clan. Mammoths lumber with sweeping tusks, leaving trails across frozen earth. Bison cluster into dense, steaming groups that could feed your people for weeks if you can bring even one down. Horses, woolly rhinos, and reindeer keep the landscape in motion, shifting like tides. The predators, of course, shadow them: saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, cave lions. You never forget that as you travel, you are also being hunted. At night, the darkness is immense. Stars crackle sharp above, brighter than modern skies dulled by city light. But that brilliance comes with terror. When the sun drops, temperatures fall fast, and your fire isn't just warmth, it's the thin barrier between you and the void. Sparks jump into the wind and die before they even touch the ground. The smell of singed fur lingers as cloaks dry by the flame, and smoke makes your eyes water. It's a small discomfort compared to what waits if the fire goes out. And yet, against all of this, humans persist. You belong to a band of maybe 20 or 30, kin-linked not just by blood but by necessity. Every day is a scramble of motion, scavenging dried roots, checking traps along the river, scouting for signs of herds. The elders mutter warnings about storm fronts. They've lived long enough to know when the sky's color means trouble. Children cling to their mothers, wrapped like bundles in stitched reindeer hide, their eyes wide as frost gathers on their lashes. There are rules here, though no one writes them down. You never waste a scrap of meat. You never let fire die, not even when marching. You never stray too far alone, because distance here is death, whether by teeth, cold, or the simple fact that no one will find your body until spring thaw. Now picture yourself trudging along a frozen valley floor. The wind whips harder as you crest a low ridge. Your nose is clogged with cold, but your eyes sting wide awake. In the distance, dark humps shift against the pale horizon. Bison, clustered together, their breaths rising in plumes. The hunters in your group lower their voices, gripping their spears a little tighter. One cracks a grin, half from nerves and half from hunger. Your stomach growls so loudly you're embarrassed, but no one laughs. Everyone feels the same hollow ache. The world around you is cruel, but it's also strangely beautiful. Hoarfrost glitters like tiny crystals across the reeds, catching fire in the sunlight. The sky is washed in pale hues, pink at dawn, a faint gold at dusk, then a cobalt so deep it swallows everything after nightfall. You know every sound of this place, the groaning shift of ice, the sudden cracking thunder of a frozen river breaking under its own weight, the eerie stillness after snowfall. These aren't just background details, they're cues for survival. Silence means predators nearby. A sudden hush among birds warns you that something larger moves in the shadows. And let's not romanticize it. Sometimes you're the one stumbling. The fur on your shoulders sags heavy with snow. The skin on your knuckles splits and bleeds, only to freeze again in tiny red lines. Jokes are still shared around the fire, yes, but they're usually about who smelled worse after trudging 3 days without washing, or who nearly fell face first into the latrine trench. Because even here, humor is survival. You might groan about your aching feet, but a good laugh keeps the night from swallowing you whole. The Ice Age pushes humans to the edge, yet something remarkable grows here. Cooperation hardens into instinct. Every member of the band, from the smallest child to the stiffest elder, has a role. When food is found, it's shared. When danger approaches, warnings spread. Your group is not simply surviving the cold, it's inventing resilience, inventing what it means to be human under pressure. It's in this crucible of ice and hunger that your story begins, not with ease, not with abundance, but with the stubborn spark that refuses to be put out, no matter how deep the snow piles or how long the nights stretch. The frozen world around you is not uniform. It is a patchwork quilt, stitched from sheets of ice, open plains, jagged mountains, and frozen rivers that twist like grey serpents across the land. At 20,000 BCE, the last glacial maximum grips the planet, and the scale of it is almost impossible to comprehend. Nearly a third of Earth's surface is buried under ice sheets, some so thick they press down the land beneath them, carving valleys and forcing the sea to retreat. Coastlines stretch far wider than modern maps, as water is locked in glaciers, dropping sea levels by more than 100 meters. What you see around you, the crunch of permafrost underfoot, the glare of sunlight bouncing off endless white, is only a fraction of the transformation unfolding across continents. Europe is capped in a frozen crown, Scandinavia is a mass of ice, and glaciers roll down through Britain, Germany, and Poland. In North America, the Laurentian and Cordilleran ice sheets swallow much of Canada and the northern United States, their surfaces scarred with crevasses. Across Asia, Siberia lies under permafrost, though not always under glaciers, creating a treacherous mix of frozen soil and tundra steppe. These regions become both barriers and highways, the coldest, most dangerous places to linger, yet also the connective tissue of migration routes. Now imagine standing on one of those open steppes. The wind is never still. It howls like a predator that has been chasing your people for centuries. The grasses are wiry and frost-crusted, their roots digging deep into soil that never thaws. Every step kicks up a puff of powder, sometimes snow, sometimes dust, because the land is so dry it often behaves more like desert than winter wonderland. This is what scientists today call a mammoth steppe, a unique biome where grasses, herbs, and shrubs dominate, sustaining massive herds of animals. For you it means survival, because those animals are both food and clothing. The air here is sharp with scents you learn to decode. The musky tang of bison dung signals a herd has passed recently, maybe close enough to track. A faint sweet rot from a frozen riverbank means a carcass is thawing, perhaps edible if scavenged quickly. Even the clean metallic sting of cold iron in the air tells you a storm is coming. As clouds gather and ice crystals form, you can't afford to miss these clues, because in a land this harsh, small mistakes snowball quickly into disaster. And the scale of it, my God, the scale. Look one way, and the horizon is blocked by glaciers, their faces shining like polished stone, fractured by blue veins where light pierces deep into compressed ice. Look another way, and the plains stretch so far they dissolve into haze, a flat expanse where herds of reindeer dot the distance like moving shadows. Somewhere beyond, jagged peaks claw into the sky, black rock dusted in white, rivers cut through valleys, frozen in some stretches but roaring in others, fed by glacial melt. They're lifelines but also traps. Cross wrong, and you're swept under slabs of ice, lost before anyone can even call your name. You trudge across this land with your group, and every feature of the landscape matters. A rise in the ground isn't just a hill, it's a lookout to scan for prey or predators. A cluster of trees isn't just scenery, it's fuel for fire, shelter from the wind, and a marker on the path. Even the footprints in snow, layered and crossed, are messages. Fresh wolf tracks mean you grip your spear tighter. Deep prints from mammoths are both hope and danger. Hope for meat and materials. Danger because one false move and you become the one crushed beneath tusks. Let's talk about temperature, because it is the invisible wall that shapes every decision. In the depths of winter, the air plunges to -20 or 30 Celsius, sometimes worse. Your breath crystallizes instantly, tiny shards that sting your lips. Sweat is dangerous here. If you overexert and your clothes dampen, the wetness turns lethal when the wind rises. At night, the cold deepens into silence, broken only by cracks of ice shifting. The stars burn brighter than anything you've ever seen, but you can't admire them long. You're too busy checking whether the fire pit stays alive, burying embers under ash to preserve them until dawn. And yet, this isn't constant misery. There are cycles. Summers, short and intense, turn the tundra green, bursting with grasses, herbs, and flowers. Reindeer calve, rivers swell, and for a few months, you breathe easier. You gather berries, roots, and herbs, storing what you can for winter. Animals fatten, which means more meat and hides when autumn hunts begin. But the rhythm is relentless. Every season is preparation for the next. The Ice Age offers no slack. Humans of this era are wanderers, not by choice but by necessity. The land won't allow permanent settlement in most places, not when herds migrate and weather shifts. Your camp might stand for weeks, maybe months if luck is good, but eventually you move. That means knowing the land deeply, where rivers freeze first, where glaciers carve dangerous chunks, where the wind funnels hardest through valleys. You become cartographers without maps, carrying the terrain in your mind, teaching children to recognize landmarks before they can walk steadily. And while the land is deadly, it's not empty. You share it with predators built for this environment. Wolves are constant shadows, sometimes competitors, sometimes unwitting allies when they lead you toward prey. Lions lurk, their silhouettes low and powerful in the dusk. Bears emerge from caves in spring, hungry and fearless. Each one is a test. Are you clever enough, strong enough, cooperative enough to not end the day as a bloodstain in the snow? But you endure step by step because humans are the one species that refuses to stay within nature's rules. You adapt, you innovate, you use every clue the land offers, turning frozen valleys into hunting grounds and ice-bound rivers into highways. You're not guests here, you're learning to be survivors. And as you glance up at the ice sheets glimmering like walls of glass, you might joke under your breath that someone should have chosen a nicer century to be born. Too late now, the world is what it is, and the only option is to keep walking, keep learning and keep carving life from a frozen earth that looks determined to erase you. You can't think of surviving in this frozen age without talking about shelter. The wind alone could flay you raw if you dared face it, unprotected, and nights stretched so long and bitter that even the bravest hunter curled up small, desperate for warmth. So you and your people build, not houses as you'd picture them today, no tidy wood cabins with smoke curling from chimneys, but raw, improvised shelters wrested from the bones of the land itself. Caves are the first gift. Nature does some of the hard work for you, carving out recesses in limestone cliffs, cracks in granite, overhangs that shield from the wind. Inside, the air is still cold, yes, but at least it doesn't cut like knives against your cheeks. The ground is swept clear, animal skins are laid, and fires crackle low, smoke gathering stubbornly near the ceiling. The walls sometimes glow with ochre or charcoal marks, painted hands or shapes of animals. You can almost imagine someone, bored on a long winter's night, reaching for a chunk of pigment and saying, might as well make this cave less depressing. But caves aren't always there when you need them. Out on the open steppe, your ingenuity has to work harder. Imagine standing before a low structure made entirely of mammoth bones, massive tusks, arched to form a frame, while ribs and leg bones are stacked like lumber. Over this skeleton, hides are stretched taut, sewn together with sinew, anchored with stones. From a distance it looks like a strange dome rising from the snow, something between a tent and a shrine. Step inside, and it's dim but warmer, the hides rustling as the wind tests their seams. The smell is a stew of smoke, damp fur, and human closeness. It's not glamorous, but it's home for now. Your people don't stop with mammoth bone huts. Smaller shelters are built from poles of wood where forests still edge the plains. Branches are lashed with sinew covered with bark, grass or hide. Snow itself is pressed into blocks, stacked into walls that insulate better than you'd think. Digging into frozen ground also works. Pits, lined with reeds and branches, create burrows, with hides stretched across the top like a roof. Every shelter is temporary, but that's the point. You're nomads, chasing herds, following seasons. Portability matters as much as sturdiness. Step inside one of these shelters, and you're wrapped in community. Fires burn low at the center, their light bouncing across faces smeared with soot, eyes reflecting orange and gold. Children doze against mothers' sides, their hair smelling of smoke. Hunters lean back against bones or packed snow, carving tools by firelight, shavings collecting at their feet. You hear the constant crackle of flame, the hiss of green wood releasing sap, the murmur of low voices, telling stories that make time pass faster. Outside, the world howls. Inside, you've carved a pocket of survival. Let's be honest, it's not luxurious. Smoke stings your eyes and the ceiling drips as heat melts frost. Lice crawl in furs. The air is thick with the smell of drying hides, sweat and meat hung near the fire. Privacy doesn't exist, unless you count pulling a fur over your head and pretending the world vanishes. Still, compared to standing exposed in the gale, this is paradise, and every adjustment, every improvement, pushes your people one notch closer to thriving rather than just enduring. Fire plays its role here too, not just as heat, but as architecture. Hearths are dug shallow, ringed with stone or bone to hold the flame. Some shelters have multiple fire pits, carefully arranged to avoid smoke suffocating the group. Ashes are scraped daily, coals buried to carry forward. A camp without fire isn't a camp at all, it's just a collection of bones and skins waiting to be blown apart. And you improvise further. Reindeer hides are sewn into coverings that flap like doors, bones are carved into hooks to hang drying meat. Stones weigh down edges so the whole shelter doesn't take flight. Over time, what starts as crude becomes clever. Your ancestors are not just scraping by, they're experimenting, improving, passing on what works. That hut of mammoth bones, it's not just shelter, it's engineering. Think about the symbolism too. To build a home from the bones of the greatest animal you hunt, it's not only practical, it's powerful. Every night, you sleep inside the very creature that once towered over you. Its strength now shields you, its hide warms you, its fat fuels your fire. The Ice Age is brutal, but it's also poetic in ways your people may not put into words but surely feel. Of course, there's one ongoing joke among the group. Whoever sleeps nearest the entrance wakes up looking like a human popsicle. Cold air pours in like a river, and if you're unlucky enough to draw that spot, expect teasing and no small amount of sympathy. Congratulations, you're our ice tester, someone mutters, and you laugh through chattering teeth, because if you don't laugh, the cold wins. Day-to-day shelters are not just places to rest, they're command centers, hospitals, nurseries. This is where decisions are argued, wounds are dressed with moss and fat, children are soothed, elders tell stories. Around the fire, myths grow, strategies form, laughter sparks. In a land that erases tracks in a heartbeat, these fragile shelters root you for a while, enough to breathe, enough to gather strength for tomorrow's march. And when you finally abandon one, moving on to follow herds or escape a storm, you leave traces. Bones collapse into heaps, hides carried with you but stains in the earth remain, tools left behind, sometimes a forgotten carving in the ash. Millennia later, archaeologists will marvel at these remnants, piecing together your ingenuity, but for you it's just necessity. Build, live, move, repeat. The truth is simple, without shelter, there's no story of survival at all. Against the glaciers and endless steppe, the only chance humans ever had was to stitch together bones, hides and stubbornness into places warm enough to last through the night. Clothing is your second skin in this world, and without it, the Ice Age would have chewed humanity into extinction long before stories like this could be told. Forget fashion weeks and silk dresses. What you wear in 20,000 BCE is less about looking good and more about not freezing solid before breakfast. Still, there's an art to it. Every piece of hide, every strip of sinew, every stitch made with a bone needle is a triumph of survival, crafted with as much care as a modern tailor fitting a suit. You start with the basics: animal hides, stripped carefully after a hunt, cleaned of fat and flesh, then softened through a messy, smelly process of scraping, stretching and smoking. Sometimes brains are mashed into the hides. Yes, brains, because their natural oils act as a conditioner, softening the leather and making it more flexible. It's not glamorous, but it works. The hides are then cut and pieced into cloaks, tunics, leggings and boots, each one stitched with sinew pulled from tendons. A single mammoth or reindeer could clothe half your group if used well. Layering is everything. A thin fur tunic, close to the skin, another hide wrapped over that, then a heavier cloak on top. Boots are stuffed with grass for insulation, furs wrapped tight around calves to keep the icy wind from sneaking in. Gloves, or mittens, are stitched from rabbit or fox fur, lined with scraps of softer leather. Every edge is bound with sinew stitching so wind can't worm its way in. If one seam pops, the cold rushes through like a thief, and you're in trouble fast. And then there are hoods. These aren't just for warmth, they're shields against the blinding glare of the sun bouncing off snow. Some even line the edges with fur, creating a soft barrier that keeps frost from forming directly on skin. Imagine trudging across a frozen plain with ice clinging to your eyelashes and cheeks, while your hood turns into a portable cave of warmth. Without it, frostbite would gnaw your ears off before you noticed. Decoration sneaks in. Even here, beads carved from bone, teeth or ivory are stitched into hems. Red ochre stains add a flash of color, not just for beauty but also for ritual meaning. You may laugh at the thought of prehistoric bling, but when your world is endless white and gray, a string of bright beads is like carrying a piece of fire against your chest. It's survival for the spirit as much as the body. You also learn to adapt clothing to tasks. Hunters wear shorter cloaks and tighter leggings for mobility, while those tending fire or scraping hides bundle in heavier furs. Children are swaddled in multiple layers, sometimes so tightly they resemble small furry bundles barely able to waddle. Elders, less mobile, are wrapped like mummies, propped close to the fire where their wisdom can keep flowing, even if their bodies falter. And don't forget the smell. Let's be blunt, hides, sinew, and fur don't exactly create a fragrance worthy of a modern perfume ad. Wet fur smells like wet dog, multiplied by 10. Add sweat, smoke and the occasional blood stain, and you're walking around as a mobile mixture of musk and ash. But in this world, no one cares. In fact, smelling strongly of smoke can even act as camouflage, masking your scent from predators. So congratulations, your stink might actually save your life. Fashion innovation doesn't stop there. Tools like awls and needles, carved from bone and ivory, allow stitching far finer than crude knots. Some groups even weave plant fibers or sinew into cords, adding strength to garments. This ability to sew tight, durable clothing is one of the quiet revolutions of the Ice Age. Without it, humans couldn't have spread into colder territories. A well-stitched seam is the line between life and frost-bitten death. Imagine huddling in your shelter at night, lit only by fire. Someone works steadily, threading sinew through a curved bone needle, pulling hide pieces together. The sound is a soft puncture, tug, puncture, tug. Outside, wolves howl. Inside, your cloak grows stronger, stitch by stitch. It's almost meditative, if meditation included, muttered curses every time the sinew frays. And because humans are humans, jokes always slip in. Someone pulls on a fur so oversized they resemble a bear and lumbers around camp, growling dramatically. Children squeal in mock terror. Another person tries to show off a new hood and gets teased for looking like a walking snow mound. Even in the fight against cold, humor stitches itself into daily life. Of course, sometimes the cold wins anyway. A mitten is lost during a hunt, a seam splits mid-journey, a bootstrap snaps as you cross frozen ground, fingers burn, toes go numb, and panic sets in. Everyone knows the signs of frostbite: pale skin that turns waxy, pain that suddenly dulls. That's when the group rallies, rubbing warmth back into limbs, wrapping with spare hides, or if desperate, pressing skin to skin under layers. Survival isn't just about clothes, it's about the people who make sure those clothes keep working when the world tries to tear them apart. By mastering clothing, Ice Age humans didn't just survive, they expanded. Wrapped in furs, they trekked farther, braved harsher climates, and carried their fires across continents. Each stitch was a quiet act of defiance, proof that the cold could not win outright. You wear the Ice Age itself on your back, turning beast into shield, bone into tool, and sinew into thread, and somehow, against the odds, you look not just like prey, but like the one species that refuses to quit. Fire is the hinge on which the Ice Age world turns. Without it, the caves and huts you live in are just cold traps. With it, you gain not only warmth but light, protection, and the ability to transform raw food into something safer, softer, and far more pleasant to chew with your worn-down teeth. Fire is a tool, a weapon, and a kind of companion. You treat it with the same respect you'd give a dangerous animal. Picture the scene: you kneel in the half-dark of a cave, or inside the low ceiling of a mammoth bone hut, crouched over a shallow pit, lined with stone. A bundle of dry grass, shredded bark or cattail fluff, sits ready in the center. Beside you, a shard of flint, a piece of pyrite, and a bone striker. One sharp strike, then another, and sparks leap out, brief flashes of light against the gloom. If you're lucky, a spark lands in the tinder, and you blow gently, coaxing smoke into flame. If you're unlucky, you'll be at it for half an hour, and someone in the group will grumble about frost forming in their hair. Once a flame takes, the whole shelter shifts. Shadows spring alive, faces glow orange, and the smell of wood smoke fills the air. Fire licks across twigs, then branches, then thicker logs. Heat radiates outward, welcome as an embrace. You hear sighs of relief. Children stretch tiny hands toward the glow, while elders shuffle closer, fur-wrapped, knees creaking. For a few hours the cold stays outside, growling like a wolf at the flap of your hide door. But keeping a fire alive is harder than making one. Wood is precious, not always abundant on the steppe. You gather branches where forests still cling to river valleys, haul driftwood from frozen streams, or even burn dried dung from mammoth or bison. Nothing is wasted. Ashes are carefully raked, and glowing embers buried under them can smolder for hours, carried forward in baskets, or wrapped in bark so the next fire doesn't have to start from scratch. Losing fire entirely is a disaster. It means shivering through the night, or worse. The rule is simple: never let it die. You learn tricks. Flint sparks are aimed into fungus like amadou, dried to fluff and quick to ignite. Feathers, resin, or even fat-smeared grasses serve as tinder. Smoke is controlled by careful stacking. Green wood hisses and smolders, while dry wood crackles and spits sparks. You discover that different woods burn differently. Birch bark flares hot, pine carries a resin scent, willow burns long and steady. Fire knowledge becomes generational lore, passed on with the same seriousness as hunting techniques. Around fire, life happens. Meals are cooked, meat roasted on spits, marrow cracked from bones and dropped sizzling onto hot stones, roots softened until chewable. Smoke cures strips of meat, stretching their usefulness for leaner months. Tools are hardened in flames. Spear tips blackened in fire gain strength. Even hides are smoked, the heat helping preserve them from rot. Fire is chemistry, though no one names it that yet. To you it's just the difference between gnawing raw sinew and tasting warmth that fills the belly. And let's not forget the psychological power. Nights in the Ice Age are long, black and absolute. Without fire, you'd sit in suffocating darkness, ears straining for predator footsteps. With fire, you push back that void. Flames dance, shadows flicker, and fear eases. Songs start, jokes slip out, like teasing the hunter who managed to set his own hair smoldering while leaning too close. Even in this harsh world, laughter is sparked as easily as tinder. Fire is also a weapon. Torches drive predators from camp, flames waved in arcs to keep wolves at bay. Smoke confuses, blinds, and warns. You've likely seen hunters use fire to flush animals, setting grass alight to push herds toward traps or spears. It's risky, yes, but when successful it means full bellies and furs for weeks. Fire makes you not just another creature huddled against the cold, but something different, something feared. But danger lies close to comfort. Shelters of hide and bone can catch if sparks leap too far. Smoke buildup chokes the air, sending coughs rattling through the group. A careless ember on fur can set clothing alight, cue another round of panicked stamping and teasing once the danger's past. Fire is not tame, you never forget that. It is borrowed, not owned, and every day you pay attention to keep it on your side. Imagine the rhythm of camp at night. Flames low, logs crackling softly. Someone adding dried dung to keep the heat alive. Children drift into dreams, curled against mothers. Hunters scrape spear shafts with glowing embers for light. Elders mumble stories, their voices crackling like the fire itself, weaving tales of spirits who gifted humanity flame. Outside the wind claws at the shelter walls, but in here the air glows warm, golden, almost soft. When dawn comes, the fire is coaxed again, ashes stirred, embers nudged awake. Breakfast is reheated scraps of meat, steaming in the cold air. The cycle continues, relentless but steady. Fire sleeps and wakes with you as essential as breath. And maybe, one night, as you stare into the flames, you think about how strange it is. This crackling force eats wood, dances like a living thing, devours without remorse, and yet, without it, you would be nothing more than another carcass on the snow. You laugh quietly to yourself. Fire is your best friend, your worst hazard, and probably the most high-maintenance roommate in Ice Age history. Hunting in the Ice Age is not sport, not pastime, it is the razor edge between starvation and survival. Out here the land does not hand you food in baskets, you take it, with sweat, with cunning, and sometimes with blood, and when you do, it is usually from beasts, so large and so dangerous that one mistake means your bones join the frozen earth. Picture a herd of mammoths, great shaggy giants, tusks sweeping long arcs of ivory, ears flapping against cold winds. They move in tight-knit groups, protecting calves in the center, trunks swaying as they rumble across the steppe. Your mouth waters at the thought, one mammoth can feed dozens, can clothe the group in hides, can warm nights with fat burned as fuel. But to bring one down, that requires more than hunger, it requires a plan. Hunters stalk low, spears grip tight, their stone points sharpened to a fine edge. Sometimes, pits are dug in advance, lined with stakes, hidden under branches and snow. Other times cliffs become allies. Hunters drive herds toward an edge, shouting, waving torches, the thunder of hooves shaking the earth until one misstep sends a beast tumbling. More often, it is patience, circling, waiting for weakness, a limping mammoth, an aging bison, a reindeer straying too far. Predators learn to watch for the weak. Humans are no different. Spears are the heart of the hunt, long shafts tipped with flint or bone, sometimes hardened with fire, sometimes fitted with detachable points that stay lodged in flesh. Atlatls, spear throwers, add force and range, snapping projectiles forward with deadly accuracy. Imagine the whistling sound as a spear arcs through frigid air, striking deep into a mammoth's flank. The beast bellows, rears, stomps, snow flying, hearts pound, feet slip. You grip tighter, adrenaline surging. This is no easy meal, this is war with a creature that weighs 10 tons. And yet it's not always mammoths. Reindeer are more frequent, their migrations predictable, their meat tender. Bison provide feasts when cornered, though their stampedes can crush hunters beneath hooves. Wild horses are swift and skittish, but once captured, their carcasses offer hides for clothing and bones for tools. Every animal carries more than food, it carries possibility. Sinews become thread, antlers become handles, stomachs become water pouches. Nothing is wasted. In the Ice Age, trash doesn't exist. Now hunting is not silent cinema, it is noisy, chaotic, and sometimes comical. Picture your group creeping close, crouched low, when suddenly someone sneezes, the herd bolts, and you're left glaring at your unlucky companion while muttering curses that would make your grandmother blush. Or imagine the time a hunter hurled his spear with all his might, only for it to bounce harmlessly off thick hide, leaving him red-faced as everyone else snickers. Humor threads through even the deadliest tasks, because if you can't laugh when a mammoth nearly tramples you, when can you? But there are darker moments too. A hunt gone wrong means injuries, a broken leg from a fall, a gash from a tusk, frostbite from being stranded in the chase. You don't forget those who don't return, their absence marked in the camp's silence. The risks are enormous, but the alternative, empty bellies, children crying from hunger, is unthinkable. So every few days, you set out again, spears in hand, courage strapped tight like a second cloak. Beyond brute force, there is knowledge. Hunters know the habits of their prey, intimately, the way reindeer hooves click as they walk, the way bison huddle against the wind, the tracks pressed into snow, the droppings that steam faintly in cold air. You read the land like a book, every print a sentence, every broken branch a clue. A good tracker is as valuable as a strong arm, and often, more so. Fire, again, becomes part of the hunt. Torches waved, grasses burned, smoke used to funnel animals. Noise works too, hunters shouting, banging stones, creating panic that drives herds into traps. Cooperation is key. One person alone cannot bring down a mammoth. 10 people, 20, working together, moving like a pack. That's survival. The payoff is immense. Picture a successful hunt. The mammoth falls with a crash that shakes the ground. Shouts erupt, spears thrust again to finish the kill. Then the real work begins. Knives slice into thick hide, steam rising as warm blood meets frozen air. Fat is collected, bones cracked for marrow, hides stripped and stretched. Children scurry to gather scraps, women slice meat into strips for drying. Elders oversee, their voices firm. Nothing wasted, nothing forgotten. The carcass becomes camp, a circle of life turning death into survival. And yes, there is celebration. Bellies fill, laughter rises, fires burn brighter. Stories are told of bravery, some exaggerated, of course. "Did you see how I leapt onto its back?" says one hunter, and everyone rolls their eyes because in truth, he tripped face first into the snow. Still, the tale will live, because stories warm as much as food. This cycle, danger, teamwork, reward, defines Ice Age life. Hunting isn't just survival, it's identity. It's where skills are honed, where bonds are tested, where humans prove, again and again, that they can stand against giants. And maybe as you sit by the fire gnawing on roasted meat, grease dripping down your chin, you smirk to yourself. For one night at least, the Ice Age lost, and you won. Not every day in the Ice Age is about spears and mammoths. Some days, survival is quieter, slower, built on patience rather than adrenaline. That's where fishing and small game come in. The overlooked meals that often keep your stomach from gnawing itself empty between big hunts. It's easy to imagine the glory of a mammoth kill, but in truth, it's the rabbits, hares, fish and birds that fill more bellies, more often. Start with the rivers. Even in a world dominated by ice, water still flows, fed by glacial melt and underground springs. Some stretches freeze solid, others run dark and fast under sheets of ice. You crouch at the bank, spear in hand, watching shadows dart beneath the surface. Fish, salmon, trout, pike, flash silver, and your eyes track their movement. A quick thrust, a practiced pull, and if fortune smiles, a wriggling body comes up, scales gleaming. It's not much compared to a mammoth, but roasted over coals, it tastes like victory. Tools help. Harpoons carved from bone or antler, their barbed tips designed to hold fast, once embedded. Nets woven from sinew or twisted plant fibers, stretched across narrow streams to trap fish. Weirs, stone or wood barriers built into riverbeds, funnel fish into enclosures where they can be scooped up by hand. These techniques aren't flashy, but they're efficient, and efficiency is everything when calories mean life. Sometimes, fishing isn't about spears at all, it's about patience. A line of twisted sinew, a bone hook tipped with bait, dropped into dark water. You sit, shivering, muttering jokes about how you've basically invented boredom. Someone nearby sighs dramatically, claiming they'd rather face a mammoth than wait another hour staring at ripples. But when the line tugs, when you haul up a gasping trout, all the complaining stops. Dinner has arrived, and suddenly, patience doesn't seem so foolish.
Then there are the small animals. Rabbits and hares dart across snow, their tracks a crisscross of tiny prints. Snares, simple loops of sinew or fiber, are set along these paths, waiting for one careless step. Deadfall traps, where a rock or log falls when bait is disturbed, catch rodents and birds. Children often check these traps, scampering back to camp with proud grins and squinting prizes. It might be just a rabbit, but that rabbit means stew for everyone. Birds too. In spring and summer, flocks return, their calls filling the air. Eggs are stolen from nests, tucked into pouches for cooking. Arrows tipped with flint or bone bring down geese and ducks, their feathers later plucked for insulation. And sometimes hunters simply wave nets overhead, clumsy but surprisingly effective when the sky is thick with wings. Small game isn't glamorous, it doesn't make stories told for generations. No one boasts, I bravely faced a hare with my mighty spear, but when winter drags long, when mammoths wander far, these little catches mean the difference between going to sleep hungry, or with warmth in your belly. And people learn to love the taste. A stew of rabbit, thick with roots and herbs, simmered in a hide pouch with hot stones, it's humble but it fills and comforts in ways roasted mammoth can't. These tasks also shape rhythm. While hunters pursue larger prey, others maintain traps, fish streams or gather birds. It's a division of labor that keeps food flowing steadily, and it's less dangerous, though not without its own hazards. Step too far onto thin ice while fishing, and you plunge into water so cold it burns, dragging you down before you can gasp. Reach into a burrow for a rabbit, only to find a badger instead, and you'll carry scratches as proof of your poor judgment. Mistakes may not always kill, but they sting literally. Let's not pretend these quieter hunts lack humor. Imagine your group carefully stalking a hare, creeping with exaggerated silence, only for it to bolt at the last second, leaving everyone sprawled in the snow. Or picture a frustrated fisherman, after hours with no catch, finally hauling up a slippery frog instead. The laughter that follows is as nourishing as the food. Jokes pass the time, ease the hunger, remind everyone that survival isn't just claws and blood, it's also stubborn joy in small victories. And here's a little secret. Small game teaches as much about the world as big hunts. Tracking rabbits sharpens your eye for prints. Fishing trains your patience and hand-eye coordination. Trapping birds forces you to study their habits, their migrations. These skills stack,
building the foundation for the larger, riskier hunts. It's a school of survival where every catch, no matter how small, is a lesson. In the long run, fishing and small game stabilize life. Mammoth hunts may define legend, but they're unreliable. You might go weeks without a big kill, and you can't eat legends. What sustains you are the steady, modest meals, the trout pulled from icy rivers, the rabbits snared in snow, the duck roasted over fire. They don't earn cheers, but they keep hearts beating, children growing, elders speaking, and in that sense they're the truest heroes of Ice Age survival. So next time you're imagining yourself as an Ice Age hunter, don't picture only the charging mammoth. Picture yourself crouched by a frozen river, fingers numb, stomach growling, praying that one more tug on your line will be enough to make the night bearable, because that's the reality. Sometimes survival looks less like glory, and more like a quiet, stubborn persistence against hunger's endless teeth. Foraging is the quieter counterpart to hunting and fishing, but it's every bit as vital. Without plants, berries, roots, and nuts, the Ice Age diet would collapse. You can't live on meat alone, not for long. Anyway, so gathering becomes the steady hum that fills the gaps between hunts. It's the work that rarely gets sung about in myths, but it keeps you alive in the margins of the mammoth steppe. Imagine a thawed patch of tundra in summer, grasses ripple low, their seeds ready for plucking, shrubs bear berries, blueberries, cranberries, cloudberries that burst tart on the tongue. Women and children kneel in the brush, fingers stained purple, baskets woven from reeds filling slowly. The air smells sharp and sweet, buzzing with insects, the kind that make you slap your neck and mutter about how even in the Ice Age, mosquitoes still find you irresistible. You laugh because of course they do, nature's eternal joke. Nuts and seeds add more variety, pine nuts, acorns, sunflower seeds collected in sacks and stored in hide pouches. Cracking them open around the fire becomes a shared chore, one person smashing shells while another picks out kernels. Someone inevitably tries to eat the shells too, swearing they'll get used to the crunch. Cue laughter, because even in survival, bad ideas keep spirits alive. Herbs and greens also matter. Wild garlic flavors stews, mint soothes stomachs, yarrow helps close wounds when chewed into a paste. Foragers learn to recognize plants with an almost uncanny precision. Pick the wrong leaf, and you'll be doubled over, cursing whoever thought it looked edible. Knowledge here is survival, passed down through whispered warnings and careful demonstration. A child learns early which berries to avoid, because mistakes are rarely forgiven by the body. Preservation is half the battle. Berries are dried on flat stones, warmed by the sun. Roots are sliced thin, smoked, or stored in pits lined with leaves. Meat may win the feast, but plants ensure the winter won't starve you when herds vanish south. It's an insurance plan, crafted one handful at a time. Foraging is also social. Unlike hunting, which risks life and limb, gathering invites conversation. People crouch together, laughing, singing, gossiping. Children dart ahead to spot berry bushes. Elders grumble about how much better the berries used to be, and everyone rolls their eyes. In these moments, survival feels less like battle, and more like community, shared work, shared harvest, shared meals. There are rituals too. Before pulling up roots, some groups sprinkle water or whisper thanks to the earth. When berries are especially plentiful, extra handfuls are left behind for animals or spirits. These small acts remind you that survival isn't just practical, it's also spiritual, a relationship with the land that provides and punishes in equal measure. And of course, accidents happen. Someone eats too many unripe berries and spends the night regretting it loudly. Someone else mistakes a patch of inedible mushrooms for dinner, only to discover their mistake after the first bite. The jokes fly fast. Well, if he dies, more food for us. Dark humor, yes, but in the Ice Age, laughter cushions even stomach cramps. The variety keeps spirits alive. Imagine a winter where all you've eaten for weeks is dried meat. Then one day, a pouch of stored cranberries is opened, their tartness exploding on your tongue. It's a small miracle, a reminder that life still has flavor. Or picture a stew thickened with roots, bubbling slowly, the smell filling the shelter until even the grumpiest elder cracks a smile. These aren't luxuries, they're sanity, served warm in a bone bowl. So while mammoth hunts make legends, it's the baskets of berries, the handfuls of nuts, the roots dug from mud, that keep hearts beating. Gathering may be humble, but it's steady, reliable, the quiet partner to the drama of the hunt. Without it, the Ice Age story of survival would have ended long before the glaciers melted. Tools are what set your people apart from every other creature pacing across the Ice Age steppe. Claws and fangs belong to predators. Speed and muscle belong to prey, but tools, stone, bone and antler shaped by patient hands, those belong only to you. Without them you're just another shivering animal with fragile skin and soft teeth. With them you're something else entirely, a species that rewrites the rules of survival. Start with stone, flint, chert, obsidian, rocks that fracture in sharp, controlled ways. You grip one in your palm, raise a hammerstone and strike. The sound is sharp, ringing, as flakes shear away. Each flake is a razor's edge, sharper than steel scalpels forged thousands of years later. You shape hand axes, scrapers, blades. The work is rhythmic. Strike, flake, rotate, strike again. Sparks leap sometimes, reminding you that this simple craft holds fire within it too. Blades fit onto wooden shafts with sinew bindings and resin glue. Spears lengthen your reach, turning frail arms into killing machines. Atletus, the spear throwers, extend your strength even more, snapping a dart forward with the force of doubled muscles. Think of it as prehistoric physics, leverage in action, crafted with nothing but intuition and practice. The first time you watch a spear fly farther than you could ever throw barehanded, you realize that humans aren't just hunters, they're engineers. Bone tools add finesse. Ribs are carved into awls, perfect for piercing hides. Antlers become handles or wedges. Long bones split into needles, so fine they stitch tight seams. Imagine sitting in the glow of firelight, a hunter threading sinew through a bone needle, sewing two hides together. Each stitch is an invention, transforming scraps into life-saving coats. Without bone needles, you'd wrap furs crudely around yourself and pray they stayed put. With them you wear tailored garments that keep wind out and warmth in. It's fashion, Ice Age style, functional, rugged, and with the occasional flair of beads or ochre stain. Stone and bone go beyond survival into creativity. Harpoons carved with barbs, ensuring fish don't slip free. Blades, serrated for sawing. Scrapers shaped for hides. Even ornaments, tiny beads drilled from ivory. Pendants carved with animal shapes. A necklace doesn't feed you, but it does something else. It reminds you that survival isn't just physical. It's also about meaning, pride, identity. Workshops form around the fire. One person chips flint, the air filled with the clicking rhythm of stone against stone. Another scrapes hides with a sharp flake, the smell of drying leather thick in the air. Children watch, mimicking, their small hands clumsy but eager. Elders guide with murmurs. Strike here, not there. Keep the edge sharp. Don't waste the core. Mistakes are common. Shattered flint, broken needles, but each one teaches. Every tool is an accumulation of generations of knowledge, hammered into shape one blow at a time. Of course, accidents happen. A shard flies off, slicing a finger, leaving blood smeared across stone. Someone drops a scraper and mutters curses as it chips in two. Another boasts about making the sharpest spear point yet, only to snap it during the first throw. Laughter follows, because humor blunts frustration just as much as a whetstone sharpens flint. Toolkits travel with you. In pouches of hide, you carry blades, scrapers, awls, needles. Each item has value beyond gold, because gold won't cut meat or stitch clothing. A single good knife is worth days of survival. Lose one, and you feel the sting as deeply as losing food. Tools are extensions of the body. Without them, you're naked before the Ice Age's teeth. Innovation never stops. Pressure flaking, pressing flakes off with bone or antler creates finer, sharper edges. Composite tools emerge, blades slotted into wooden handles, multiple parts working as one. Hunters improve spear balance, adding grooves for grip. Fishermen craft barbed harpoons that hold wriggling fish tight. Even fire-making tools evolve. Pyrite struck against flint to create sparks. Tinder pouches carried carefully to ensure flame never fully dies. It's easy to overlook how radical this is. No other species reshapes the environment so deliberately. Wolves sharpen only their instincts. Humans sharpen stone. Lions inherit claws. Humans invent spears. The difference seems small in the moment, just a sharper edge, a tighter seam, but across generations it rewrites destiny. And tools don't just change survival, they change community. Skilled tool makers earn respect, their work vital to the group. A hunter may kill a mammoth, but only because a flint napper shaped the spear that pierced its hide. Credit spreads across the campfire, everyone aware that survival is never the work of one alone. Picture the pride of slipping a newly sewn hide cloak over your shoulders, stitched with bone needles, cut with flint scrapers, tied with sinew cords. It's not just clothing, it's proof of ingenuity, proof that fragile hands can shape the hardest stone into something sharper than fangs. The Ice Age presses hard, but with every blade, every needle, every tool, humans press back. And maybe, as you sit at the fire, sharpening a flake to a fresh edge, you smirk at the thought, other animals have claws given to them by nature. You make your own, and that's why you're still here. Life in the Ice Age isn't just about spears, fires and frozen rivers, it's about people and how they fit together into fragile but resilient groups. Alone you wouldn't last a week. Together, your clan becomes a web of roles, rhythms and responsibilities that keep everyone alive. Survival is communal, and every member of the band, from the smallest child to the stiffest elder, has a place in that web. Picture a camp of maybe 25 souls. The shelter hums with low voices, smoke drifting upward, fire crackling at the center, hunters sharpen spears, scraping away at flint edges. Foragers return with baskets of roots or berries, their laughter quick, their faces flushed from the effort. Children dart about underfoot, their games a noisy mix of mimicry and chaos. Tiny hands clutching stick spears, chasing each other in mock hunts. Elders sit close to the fire, their eyes half clouded, but their voices steady as they teach, warn and remember. This is the heartbeat of Ice Age life. Roles aren't rigid, but they exist. Hunters, mostly young adults, carry the burden of chasing mammoths, bison and reindeer. Their strength and speed matter, but so does their ability to cooperate. Foragers, women, children, and sometimes older men carry equal weight, gathering plants, checking traps, fishing streams. Toolmakers shape bone needles, carve harpoons, flake flint into blades. Elders hold memory, where rivers flood, when herds pass, which berries heal and which poison. Knowledge isn't written, it's carried in words, repeated until it sticks like a song. And everyone contributes. Even the youngest child helps, gathering twigs for fire, scaring birds from drying meat, carrying messages across camp. Elders too frail to hunt or walk far still advise, still tell stories that hold the group together. No one is useless in a world this sharp-edged. Every hand matters. Food sharing is law. A mammoth killed isn't claimed by one hunter, but divided across the band. The best cuts go to children, pregnant women and elders, not out of charity but necessity. Survival of the group outweighs pride. If someone hoards, they face ridicule, sometimes exile, the harshest punishment possible. Better to starve together than to fracture trust. Cooperation isn't a virtue here, it's survival currency. Around the fire you see social life bloom. Stories pass from mouth to mouth, mixing memory, myth and comedy. Someone mimics a clumsy hunter who fell into a snowdrift, the camp roaring with laughter. Another recounts the spirit of the mammoth, half serious, half joke, their voice lowering as flames flicker high. Music slips in too, drums made from stretched hide, flutes carved from bone, voices raised in rhythm. It's entertainment, but also cohesion. The group that laughs, sings, and remembers together fights hunger and cold with more than furs and fire. Conflict still sparks. Arguments over food, over direction, over who pulls their weight. Voices rise, faces flush. But fights rarely last. Anger drains quickly when you need the person next to you to watch for wolves or stitch your torn boot. Grudges shrink in the face of survival. That doesn't mean no one sulks. There's always someone brooding near the entrance, arms crossed, waiting for an apology. But by morning, they're back, because pride freezes faster than skin. Gender roles exist, but aren't absolute. Yes, men often hunt, women often forage, but necessity bends rules. A skilled woman might track reindeer better than any man, an injured hunter might weave nets or scrape hides. Flexibility is key. The Ice Age doesn't care about categories, it cares whether you contribute, and so the group adapts, assigning tasks by ability more than dogma. Children grow within this web. From the time they can toddle, they're given small tasks. They learn by watching, by copying, by failing. A child's first successful snare is celebrated. Their first stone tool, clumsy and chipped, is kept like a treasure. Childhood isn't idle play, it's apprenticeship in survival, and yet play still matters. Games mimic hunts. Competitions sharpen aim. Laughter strengthens bonds. Through games, they rehearse the skills they'll need, while also keeping spirits light. Elders are living libraries. They've seen winters worse than this one. Storms that buried shelters, hunts that nearly failed. They speak in slow, deliberate words, weaving instruction into stories. Don't cross that river in spring. It swallows men whole. Don't trust the berry with the bitter taste. It carries death in its skin. Their wrinkles aren't weakness, they're records of endurance. And when they pass, their absence echoes, as if a fire has gone out that can't be relit. Even rituals tie the group together. Meals are eaten communally, with jokes and gratitude. Hunts are celebrated with dances or chants, honoring the animal's spirit. Births are marked with gifts of beads or ochre. Deaths bring quiet ceremonies, burials in red earth, bodies wrapped in furs, tools placed beside them. These acts aren't luxuries. They bind the group, giving meaning to struggle, reminding everyone that they are part of something bigger than one body trudging through snow. Humor, again, keeps the group breathing. When frost clings to your beard, someone jokes you're trying a new fashion trend. When smoke fills the shelter, laughter erupts at the sight of everyone coughing and blinking like owls. Even misfortune is softened. A failed hunt becomes a funny story. A clumsy fall becomes a running gag. The Ice Age is merciless, but laughter keeps its teeth from sinking too deep. So when you look at your small band huddled in the glow of firelight, you realize this is the real secret of survival. Not the sharpest spear, not the thickest hide cloak, not even the cleverest tool. It's people, messy, stubborn, quarrelsome, hilarious people, woven into a web where everyone holds everyone else up. Alone, you are fragile. Together, you are unbreakable. Movement is the rhythm of Ice Age life. You don't stay in one place long, because the land won't allow it. Herds migrate, rivers freeze and thaw, storms bury valleys in snow. To survive, you follow patterns as old as memory, trekking across endless miles with your group, carrying everything you own on your back or your sled. Migration is less a choice and more a heartbeat. You move because if you don't, the land itself will kill you. Your world is shaped by these routes, valleys carved by glaciers, rivers that cut through tundra, forests clinging to slopes, all become markers on the journey. You know where reindeer cross rivers, where bison graze in autumn, where mammoths trample paths through steppe. Each landmark is memorized and repeated. The bent tree that points east, the rock shaped like a bear, the ridge that glows red at sunset. This is your map, not drawn on hides but carried in minds and passed through stories. Movement isn't easy. Picture trudging knee-deep through snow, the wind clawing your face, breath burning your lungs. Children cry, elders limp, sleds creak under loads of meat and hides. Feet blister, shoulders ache, frost bites at fingers, and still, you walk. Rest is brief, just enough to drink, melted snow, gnaw dried meat, shift burdens from one back to another. Complaints fly, someone muttering that if the elders are wrong about the next herd they're turning around. Laughter follows, because no one can turn back. The only path is forward. Tools of movement evolve. Sleds dragged by hand or by dogs, already semi-tamed in this era, carry loads too heavy to bear. Snowshoes, frames of wood and hide, spread weight across crusted snow. Rafts lashed from logs or bundles of reeds ferry groups across rivers. You adapt endlessly, because the land never sits still. One day, you're crossing frozen plains under skies alive with auroras. The next, you're slogging through boggy marsh, swarmed by mosquitoes that make you long for the return of blizzards. Migration also brings encounters. As groups move, they meet others, sometimes kin, sometimes strangers. Exchanges happen, a new flint knapping technique, a different style of spear point, beads carved from shells found far to the south. Sometimes marriages are arranged, weaving ties between bands. Other times, tensions flare. A hunting ground can't feed two groups, and arguments sharpen into conflict. Arrows fly, spears thrust, and blood stains snow. Movement is opportunity, but it's also risk. There are jokes too, because even in hardship humor travels. Someone stumbles into a snowdrift, vanishing up to their neck, and the camp erupts in laughter before pulling them out. Children complain of tired legs, only to sprint ahead the moment they spot berries. A hunter swears he recognizes a landmark, only for the elder to shake their head and remind him he's been lost 3 times this year. These small moments soften the grind of endless walking. And at night, migration turns quiet. The group huddles under hides, stars blazing above, auroras rippling green and violet across the sky. Fires burn low, sled dogs curl at your side, and the world feels vast but shared. Tomorrow, you'll wake, shoulders sore, feet cracked, ready to walk again, because that's what survival means here. You keep moving, no matter how far, no matter how tired. The Ice Age doesn't wait for you, it shifts, freezes, melts, pushes, and so, you move with it. one step, one season, one migration at a time, until the trails of your people stretch not just across valleys and rivers, but across the entire world. Even in a world carved by glaciers and sharpened by hunger, humans found time to make beauty. Art blooms across the Ice Age, not because people were comfortable, but because they weren't. When survival is a daily wrestle, meaning becomes as vital as meat or fire, and so you paint, carve, stitch, and decorate, transforming caves and tools into canvases, turning survival into story. Picture the walls of a cave deep in France or Spain. You walk into the flicker of torchlight, smoke curling against limestone ceilings, and there it is, horses galloping in ochre red, mammoths outlined in black charcoal, reindeer sketched in delicate strokes. The walls move with life, the flickering flame making painted beasts seem to run. Some are simple outlines, others layered with shading that makes muscles ripple. You touch the cold rock and feel the grooves where fingers pressed pigment thousands of years ago. These images weren't random doodles, they were statements, prayers, memories. They said we were here, we saw these creatures, they mattered. Not every cave wall was about animals. Hands appear too, negative prints, blown with ochre around splayed fingers, as if someone pressed their palm to stone and said, "Remember me." Dozens, sometimes hundreds, overlapping like a crowd of ghosts. Imagine the hush of a group gathered, one by one leaving their handprint, laughter soft, maybe nervous, as children reach too high and smear pigment across stone. It's art, but it's also belonging. Carvings bloom too, antlers and bones are etched with lines, sometimes geometric, sometimes animals, sometimes something stranger, patterns we still puzzle over. Ivory becomes beads, pendants, figurines. Some are simple, others, like the famous Venus figurines, exaggerate human forms, broad hips, rounded bellies, pendulous breasts. These aren't portraits, they're symbols, likely of fertility, abundance, survival in a land where babies dying was far more common than living. Jewelry is everywhere, teeth drilled and strung, shells carried from coasts hundreds of miles away, beads of ivory or bone. You string them into necklaces, stitch them into clothing, wear them into hunts. Maybe they signal status, maybe protection, maybe just joy. In a landscape of endless white, a flash of color, a rattle of beads, a glint of ivory catches the eye and reminds you, life isn't only gray. Music too fills the dark, flutes carved from bird bones or mammoth ivory, their notes soft but haunting, drums stretched from hides, rattles filled with pebbles, voices rising in chants. Around fires, songs echo, part entertainment, part memory, part ritual. Children sway, elders beat rhythm, hunters add verses boasting of their skill, usually exaggerated, to everyone's amusement. Laughter cuts through the cold, and suddenly, the Ice Age feels less like a prison and more like a stage.
Why art?
Because survival isn't just eating and not freezing, it's also believing you matter. Art is how you tell yourself the struggle has meaning. That mammoth on the wall, it's not just food, it's a spirit, a challenge, a triumph. That handprint, it's proof that in a vast, indifferent world, one human stood here and declared existence. And don't underestimate humor. Someone carving a tiny figurine of a plump reindeer might exaggerate it into ridiculous proportions, making others snort with laughter. Someone else sketches a hunter with an absurdly oversized spear, clearly poking fun at a boastful comrade. Art wasn't always solemn, it was play, satire, joy. Even now, thousands of years later, some of the little carvings look like ancient inside jokes, and you can almost hear the snickering. But art also carried weight. Rituals and ceremonies were woven into it. A hunt might begin with painting an animal on stone, a symbolic capture before the real one. Beads placed in graves spoke of protection or status. Music guided trance states, pulling people into worlds of spirits and ancestors. Picture yourself, after a long day of trudging through snow, belly aching, hands stiff. You enter a cave lit by flickering torches, walls alive with color. You hear flute notes rising, voices humming low. You sit, warmed by fire and community, and you feel something shift inside. Hunger eases, fear softens, the Ice Age feels less crushing. For a moment, you're not just surviving, you're alive. That's the power of Ice Age art. It's not luxury, it's not distraction, it's medicine for the spirit. And maybe, as you smear ochre across stone, leaving your handprint among dozens of others, you smirk to yourself. The glaciers may tower, the wolves may prowl, but you've left a mark, and that mark, red and stubborn on cold rock, might just outlast the ice itself. Death stalks you constantly in the Ice Age, through hunger, cold, predators, or the simple misstep of falling into a frozen river. But what happens after death matters just as much as survival. The first humans who endured this world didn't simply abandon their dead. They mourned, they buried, they painted, they left offerings. Burial and ritual practices reveal that even here, in a land where every calorie mattered, people still paused to honor the departed, still sought meaning beyond breath. Picture a shallow grave dug into permafrost, the soil hacked with stone tools, every stroke slow and grueling. The body, wrapped in furs, is lowered gently, ochre sprinkled across skin and clothing like a fiery blessing. Red ochre, iron-rich earth, was everywhere in burials. It stains bones crimson even thousands of years later, as if blood itself had been painted back onto the body. To your people, this wasn't random decoration. It symbolized life, rebirth, or connection to earth and spirit. Imagine fingers rubbing that gritty powder onto cheeks, whispering prayers into frozen air. Graves weren't empty either. Tools are placed alongside, flint blades, scrapers, needles, sometimes whole spears. Beads and pendants rest on chests, teeth strung around necks, ivory figurines tucked near hands. You don't bury only flesh, you bury stories, identities, hopes. A child might be buried with tiny beads, each one a painstaking gift. An elder might be covered in ornaments that speak of long years and status. These offerings suggest belief that the dead carried tools into another life, or at least that the living couldn't imagine sending them off empty-handed. There are striking graves. In Sungir, Russia, a boy was buried with more than 4,000 ivory beads sewn into clothing, each bead taking an hour or more to make. That's not just burial, that's devotion, a community spending thousands of hours ensuring one child entered death adorned. You can almost hear the whispers, the singing, the tears as beads were pressed into the soil one by one. Burials weren't uniform. Some bodies were crouched, knees to chest, as if curled back into the womb. Others lay stretched out, arms crossed. Some were sprinkled with antlers, tusks, or animal skulls, perhaps to connect them with spirits of beasts. Sometimes multiple people were buried together, their bodies side by side, a family or group locked together in eternity. These choices weren't accidents, they were statements. The dead weren't gone, they were transformed. Fire sometimes played a role, not cremation as we know it, but smoldering fires lit near graves, smoke rising like prayers. Bones occasionally show scorch marks, suggesting rituals of burning parts, perhaps to release spirit through flame. The smell of charred bone mingled with pine resin and hide smoke must have been unforgettable, heavy with both grief and reverence. And it wasn't only burials. Caves often served as ritual spaces, filled with bones arranged in deliberate ways. Skulls of cave bears stacked in niches, mammoth bones set in circles, human remains placed in patterns. Some archaeologists argue these were shrines, places where spirits of animals and people were honored. Imagine stepping into a cave flickering with torchlight, walls painted with animals, bones arrayed on the floor. It's eerie, yes, but also sacred, a reminder that life and death braided together in ritual. Spiritual belief is hinted in every gesture. Death isn't treated as final, it's a crossing. Red ochre, beads, tools all suggest preparation for a journey. Maybe you believed the dead walked into another world, or lived as spirits among the herds, or returned as ancestors guiding hunts. Whatever the details, you didn't see death as nothingness, you saw it as transformation, something requiring care. And yet, humor survived even here. Imagine a group digging a grave in frozen soil, grumbling that the ground was harder than mammoth skulls. Someone mutters that the dead chose the worst season to die, earning weary chuckles. Or a hunter is buried with his broken spear, his companions joking softly that maybe he'll finally hit something in the next life. Even grief needed laughter, because tears alone couldn't bear the weight. Burials also strengthened community. To gather, to pause, to bury, meant reaffirming bonds. The living stood shoulder to shoulder, honoring one of their own. That act declared, we care. Even when the Ice Age tells us not to. The dead might be gone, but their memory became firelight stories, warnings, guidance. Their presence lingered in the shelter, in the minds of children who asked questions about ochre, beads, bones. Imagine being there, crouched beside a grave, ochre dust clinging to your fingers, firelight flickering. You whisper thanks, promises, maybe even jokes through tears. Snow falls silently, covering footprints, but not erasing what happened. The Ice Age is merciless, but in burial, you carve out mercy, insisting on humanity in a world that tries to strip it away. So yes, death is constant, but burial shows something greater, resilience of spirit. Even here in the coldest age, people remembered, honored, loved, and in those crimson-stained bones, you glimpse not just survival, but the stubborn insistence that life had meaning worth carrying into eternity. The Ice Age was never static. Even as glaciers towered across continents, the climate pulsed with shifts, some slow, others sudden, all demanding that humans adapt or vanish. You think of ice as eternal, but to your ancestors it was alive, advancing, retreating, cracking, melting. The air grew warmer in cycles, animals shifted routes, rivers swelled or dried. For the people trudging across tundra, these changes weren't abstract, they were daily, often brutal, lessons in flexibility. Start with warming periods. Every few centuries the planet hiccuped, pushing back the edge of the glaciers, temperatures rose, grasses spread, forests crept northward. Where once mammoths roamed endless plains, now stands of birch and pine began to cluster. To you this meant food sources shifted, reindeer followed, new routes, bison herds scattered into forests, rivers opened for longer seasons of fishing. Change could be opportunity, but it also meant abandoning familiar paths. Imagine an elder muttering, "The herds used to cross here," while younger hunters pointed to tracks far to the east. Knowledge that once kept you alive could suddenly betray you. And climate change wasn't just temperature. Storms could hammer for days, snow piling until shelters collapsed. Sudden thaws flooded valleys, rivers bursting with meltwater, winds shifted, driving blizzards across plains where skies had been clear. The unpredictability was maddening. You might laugh bitterly around the fire, joking that even the weather had a cruel sense of humor. Yesterday too much snow, today no snow but no food either. Tomorrow, maybe both. Humor dulled the sting of helplessness. Animals bore the brunt of these shifts, and so did you. When warming spread forests, some megafauna thrived, while others dwindled. Mammoths struggled as grasslands shrank, reindeer adapted more easily. Humans learned to follow suit. New tools emerged for fishing swollen rivers. Smaller, lighter weapons appeared as prey shifted from giants to quicker, nimbler game. Flexibility wasn't a luxury, it was the only guarantee of another winter survived. Migration paths bent with climate. Groups moved south during cold surges, north again when warmth allowed. Over generations, these movements stretched human footprints across continents. Land bridges opened when seas dropped, then disappeared when waters rose. Imagine crossing Beringia, that vast, wind-swept plain connecting Asia and America, on for your descendants centuries later to find it drowned under ocean. Your people didn't just survive change, they rode it, spread with it, became the first explorers not by choice but by necessity. Even daily life adjusted. Firewood supplies dwindled in treeless plains, so you burned dung. Shelter designs shifted with conditions. Snow houses in one season, mammoth bone huts in another. Clothing grew heavier or lighter, stitched for shifting climates. Foraging knowledge constantly updated, new plants appearing, old ones vanishing. Elders passed on warnings, but sometimes their memories clashed with new reality, and youth had to teach age. That reversal wasn't always easy. You can imagine the squabbles. "The river always freezes here." "Not anymore, old man." Still, both sides were right. The land itself had changed. Spiritual life bent with climate too. When herds dwindled, rituals grew more intense, more ochre sprinkled on graves, more songs sung to animal spirits. When warming allowed abundance, celebrations grew louder, beads and carvings multiplying. Belief adapted alongside bodies and tools, reshaping meaning to match shifting skies. And through it all, resilience hardened. The Ice Age wasn't simply endured, it was negotiated. Every storm and thaw forcing new solutions. One generation discovered that snowshoes made marches easier. Another found that fishnets fed camps when mammoths disappeared. Each adaptation stacked, layer upon layer, until humanity became not just a species that endured, but one that thrived by bending with the climate's moods. Imagine sitting by the fire as an elder tells of winters when snow buried camps for weeks. Now the ground is bare, grass sprouting early. You laugh, shake your head, mutter that at least you can walk without sinking. But you also know the truth. Next season the snow may return worse than ever. Certainty is a luxury you don't own. All you own is flexibility, carried like a tool sharper than any flint blade. So when you picture Ice Age survival, Don't see it as static men and women locked forever in fur and frost. See it as motion, invention, reaction. The glaciers advanced, you moved. Rivers thawed, you fished. Herds vanished, you trapped rabbits. Climate tested endlessly, and endlessly, you adapted. That cycle of shift and response wasn't just survival, it was training for the human future. When groups wandered in search of food and shelter, they didn't always travel alone. Across the frozen plains and forests of the Ice Age, other humans lived and moved too. Sometimes you stumbled upon them unexpectedly, smoke rising on the horizon where you thought the land was empty. Sometimes you sought them out, following old trails and rumors of kin. These encounters could mean exchange, friendship, marriage, or just as easily, tension, suspicion, and blood. Imagine cresting a ridge and spotting figures below, their furs heavy, their sleds piled high. For a moment, everyone in your band freezes. Are they kin? Strangers? Rivals? You grip your spear tighter, eyes narrowing, but then someone among them waves, raising a hand high, showing they carry no weapon ready. Slowly, your people exhale. The encounter begins not with combat but with negotiation, played out in cautious steps across snow. Exchange is the first language. You show them your beads of ivory, carefully carved. They offer you shells, strung on sinew gleaming white, carried from coasts hundreds of miles away. Your flint blades, sharp and dark, are bartered for their amber or ochre. Sometimes it isn't objects but knowledge, how to nap a cleaner edge, how to stitch hide tighter where the herds are moving this season. Information spreads faster than footprints, carried from one group to the next. In this way, culture itself migrates, not just people. Marriage binds groups further. A daughter leaves with a neighboring band, her beads traded for reindeer hides. A son follows another clan south, carrying your stories into their fires. These unions aren't just romance, they're strategy. New blood strengthens kinship ties, creating networks of allies. When winter presses hardest, a distant cousin's camp might welcome you because bonds were sealed long ago in the flicker of torchlight. But not every meeting is peaceful. Resources are limited, and territory means survival. Two groups might claim the same valley where herds cross, or the same river where fish run thick. Words rise, gestures sharpen, and before long spears are lifted. Skirmishes break out, brief, brutal, chaotic. A man falls, blood staining snow, and both groups retreat, knowing more fighting only risks extinction for both sides. Later, around the fire, someone mutters bitterly about the greedy fools to the west, and your group laughs darkly, though the tension lingers. Jokes flow even between groups. One stranger teases your people for smelling too strongly of smoke. Your group fires back that at least you're not dressed like lost bears. Laughter smooths suspicion. Gifts pass hands, beads, tools, even bits of food. When dawn comes, the groups part, trails diverging, but the memory remains. Perhaps next season you'll meet again, or perhaps not. The Ice Age is wide, and paths rarely cross twice the same way. Some exchanges leave deeper imprints. Techniques spread, better spear throwers, new trap designs, decorative styles. The Venus figurines found across Europe aren't identical, but they echo one another, proof that ideas traveled even when people didn't. From Siberia to Spain you can trace networks of influence, like a web strung across tundra and forest. The Ice Age wasn't isolation, it was connection, carried step by step, fire by fire. Of course gossip traveled too. Strangers warn of dangerous groups beyond the next river, of valleys haunted by wolves, of sickness spreading in certain camps. You don't know if it's truth or exaggeration, but you carry it forward anyway. Stories grow in the telling, sometimes turning real dangers into myths. Beware the people with painted faces. Someone whispers, and even if no one has seen them firsthand, the warning shapes decisions. Encounters remind you that humans were never solitary. You weren't just small bands drifting endlessly. You were nodes in a wider network, connected by exchanges of blood, beads, and stories. Each meeting carried risk, yes, but also possibility. Without it, your group would wither in isolation. With it, knowledge, genes, and culture spread, weaving humans into something far greater than any one camp. Picture the farewell of a peaceful meeting, strangers turning east, your band turning west. For a long while, you glance back, watching their silhouettes shrink against the horizon. There's a pang, a strange comfort in knowing others walk this frozen world too. And maybe, as the laughter of last night lingers in your ears, you whisper a thought into the wind. In a land of ice, it's good to know you're not alone. When you look back across the Ice Age, The story of survival isn't just about spears, fires, or furs, it's about legacy. The people who trudged across frozen plains, stitched hides in smoky shelters, and painted animals on cave walls didn't just endure their own lifetimes, they laid foundations for everything that came after. The resilience they forged, the knowledge they carried, the connections they built, those threads stretch forward, tying you here and now to them. Think of the skills: fire making, hide stitching, flint knapping, food preservation, practices honed against the cold carried into warmer ages, each trick passed from parent to child, refined, spread. By the time glaciers began retreating, humanity had built a toolbox so effective that even shifting climates couldn't erase it. These weren't just survival hacks, they were the first chapters of technology. When later farmers sowed seeds or builders raised stone, they were drawing from the same ingenuity sharpened in the Ice Age. Think of the migrations. Berinia, the land bridge across what is now the Bering Strait, wasn't a story of myth, it was walked, step by aching step, by bands who carried fire and stories into new continents. The Americas, once untouched by human feet, became home because Ice Age survivors kept walking. From Europe to Asia, Africa to Australia, footprints stamped into snow and sand became the earliest map of human spread. That wanderlust wasn't accidental, it was born in the necessity of chasing herds, rivers and seasons, habits that hardened into exploration. Think of the art. Those ochre handprints, ivory beads, and bone flutes weren't idle distractions. They were sparks of meaning in a world that could easily feel meaningless. The impulse to decorate, to sing, to mark existence against stone, that didn't vanish when the glaciers did. It blossomed into myths, religions, music, architecture. The first cathedrals were caves, the first scriptures painted animals, the first orchestras were fireside flutes. Every creative act you know today has roots in those Ice Age evenings when someone said, "Let's make this wall dance with color." Think of the spirit. The Ice Age didn't allow weakness, but it also didn't reward selfishness. Groups that hoarded or fractured vanished. Groups that shared, laughed, mourned, and worked together endured. That legacy remains. Your modern cities, your families, your global networks, those are magnified echoes of small camps, huddled under hides, learning that survival was a collective act. The Ice Age trained humanity in cooperation, empathy and humor as much as in tool use and fire. And think of the resilience. Every storm weathered, every frost-bitten toe, every failed hunt, followed by another try, all of it taught humans that endurance itself was a weapon. The glaciers pressed down and instead of breaking, people bent, adapted and bounced back. That's why thousands of years later you sit here listening, because someone refused to quit when the cold howled hardest. Now let's slow this story. Picture a final camp, fire glowing low, snow drifting soft outside. The mammoth hunts are fewer now, forests are spreading, rivers are swelling with melt, children chase each other around the fire, their laughter echoing off bone walls. Elders smile, knowing the world is shifting, but also that the people are ready. The Ice Age is ending.